Hello everyone, I've just read chapter 3 of Coruscant Nights Jedi Twilight. Not Jedi Twilight, Street of Shadows. So we pick up with some new characters. I think Ves Violet, and Dejah. And I looked her up on Wikipedia, spoiled myself that she dies because I was trying to find her species. If I only read a little bit further on, I would have found her species. She was a Celtron and her full name's Dejah Dulware, I think. But anyway, um, pretty much Dejah's trying to convince Vess to not think about a rumor he's heard. Um, Dejah's a Celtron, Vess is a Kamasi, and there's been rumours that the Kamasi are very peaceful people, have been killed, have been on the brink of extinction. They're being exterminated, and Dee just trying to stop Vess from looking and and not paying attention to the rumor, and because they have a show to put on, and he might want, and he's going to win awards for it, etc. But Vess, he just can't handle it anymore, so he goes over to a workbench and he pulls up a news article and it confirms what he thinks. They have been decimated. But the news article says that it was probably some rogue bombs that hit the planet from the end of the Clone Wars, and Vess is not taking that. He's taking that with a massive pinch of salt, and he's certain that Palpatine had given the order himself. And he's just shocked and grief-stricken. Um, and then he's struck with what's known as a Memnis, and it's a power native. It's a power strictly for the Kamasi, that allows them to kind of lets them kind of see past events, and share experiences in a way. I guess it's not really explained massively well. It's not really explained at all in this chapter. Um, but he's shown a memory of him when he was 3 months before we left Kamar. I think that's what it was called, Kamar. Um, and of course, the Kamar's been decimated. And he's remembering all the beautiful scenery, and then he's stricken with all the dying screams of everyone and the impact of everyone. And it all shatters like glass shards, the Memnis. And he starts to understand that this isn't just the reason why he's seen this is because Kamasi have an ability to also can share their experiences and particularly grief-stricken experiences, to try and dissipate the pain and the grief. And what he's feeling is everyone else's, I guess, Memnis from the Kamasi. And Dejah guides him over to a couch to rest, to lie down for a moment. It doesn't really help Vess at all. Um, and eventually, when it's over, Dejah is very concerned. It says he's his partner. I don't know whether that means they are together romantically or whether they're working partners. It's not really clarified. I assume working partners, but also from what it seems, they do seem quite close. I also won't surprise if they're romantic partners. Um, and Vess asks, not Vess, Dejah asks if Vess is okay. And Vess explains to Dejah what had happened, and Dejah says that, well, they can't do the show now, they have to postpone it. And Vess says that no, it's more important than ever that they do the show now, because as long as one Kamasi lives and is creating art, um, then the Emperor hasn't won. And he walks over. I'm just gonna have to read out this last bit because it's the bits that I really was struggling. This last bit I was really struggling to follow. Then lurched to his feet, his head feeling as if a comet had just impacted him. had just impacted it. Dejah stood as well, offering her hand in concern, but Ves waved it off. Offer my apologies to the clientele. Tell them that illness prevents me from attending. He moved over to his workbench and activated the plasmatic flux inducer. An oscillating hum quickly rose to the edge of hearing. A parabolic cone of blue light, a meter tall, materialized. Ves fed torsion into it, adjusting the ellipsis. The flame of plasma twisted and gave a low electronic moan. And Ves tells Dejah that it's almost time, and she better let them in. And Dee just says, "Well, okay, it seems like you know what you're doing." Um, and then Dejah leaves, and we pick back up with what Ves is doing. Ves concentrated on the tall spearhead of light. He had his neon, krypton, xenon. The plasma flushed red, green, blue. He adjusted tinctures, spun the result through various arcs. Simplicity, that was the key, of course. The emotional power lay in that. Dejah was right. Ves knew exactly what he was doing. He was building a cairn, making a memorial, and that's where we end the chapter. I have no idea what these characters are going to have to do with the rest of the book. I'm assuming, because of course I had to turn the page to get to pull up the next chapter. It would not surprise me if Jax has felt the deaths of all the Kamari. I assume that's probably what's going to wind up. I assume that's going to be like the first kind of connection of these two storylines, of Jax's storyline and this storyline. Dejah at first, she was definitely someone where it was, I'm not too sure about her character, but I tended him to ignore the rumours. But then at the end, you very much see that, their connection, and I think, that let me warm up to her a bit. So I'm definitely looking forward to see how Ves and Dejah are in other chapters. Again, I'm interested to see how this chapter is how this storyline is somehow going to connect to Jax's. Is it going to be? Is it? I have a feeling it may be related to Whiplash in a way. I have a feeling that maybe the Empire will now be hunting down remaining Kamasi, maybe, and maybe Ves and Dejah will be on that, and Jax and everyone else has to get them to safety. Through Whiplash, that wouldn't surprise me. That seems like that's probably the most likely answer, but of course there could be other answers. Um, again, the Memnis. It's not very well explained, but it was definitely an interesting part of the chapter. It was an interesting part of the chapter, definitely, but I think it could have been at least explained to us what a Memnis was, rather than just showing us and not really giving us much indication as to what's going on, and what a Memnis is. It seems like it was a memory. It seems like it was a memory mixed with a vision, but it just also doesn't feel. But also that even that doesn't quite feel like it's the correct description of it. So I wish they kind of explained what a Memnis was, because it really it kind of just trucks you in with it, just showing you what a Memnis is, rather than explaining what it is. I think that would have probably helped make the vision a little bit easier to follow and understand if it was actually explained what a Memnis was, and how it's triggered, what kind of effects it can have. Or just telling us what it is. I don't have to go into all the details, but just telling us, what a Memnis is would have really helped or help in this chapter. Um, but this again, you can understand how grief-stricken he is. There's at one point, I think, just before the Memnis, where he's just struck with so much shock, and he wonders if he'll come out of this with his sanity intact. Um, and the intensity of the memories as well. It gets very intense, and even Deja's surprised at just how intense that the memories was. There's really I'm struggling to say a lot about this chapter, mainly just because it is a chapter that goes on for quite a few pages, but in the end, it's not really a whole lot to talk about. Um, it's not like a combat chapter where it's not where there really is just very little to talk about. Like, there is stuff to talk about, but it's very you can I already covered everything. Um, I'm I wasn't entirely sure um Ves was doing there at the end when I really need to just for me it was just all the technical terms. It was really a massive struggle for me to follow it. I think based on searching up definitions etc. He's trying to make some sort of memorial for the Kamasi based based solely on the ending word there, which was Cairn. Um, but when it was being described, I felt like it was. I thought he was bringing up some sort of hologram to kind of like somehow attack Coruscant or something. On a hologram, not literally, of course, but on a hologram. Um, just get the just get his grief out or something. But no, it seems like it's making a memorial or something. It was a really massive struggle for me to follow that last bit with all the technical terms. It just was hey. So yeah, I struggled to follow that last bit. Um, but yeah, I enjoy the chapter. I really do not know what relevance this is going to have to the other characters. But then again, I was saying that about Cairn's storyline, and that and his somehow was able to connect back into the main storyline in the last book. So yeah, I think that brings an end to this review. So thank you all for watching. Actually, do I have more to say? I mean, you understand the pain Vess is feeling with almost his entire species gone. There's only a couple million left. It's brought up that there probably won't be much hope for them to rebuild. Um, and you really do see and you really do understand how much pain he must be in from this. So yeah, again, don't really have much else to say. So thank you all for watching and goodbye. Hello, I've just read chapter 4 of Coruscant Nights Street of Shadows. Yes, I got it right. Uh, quickly before we get into this, one I forgot to bring it up last chapter. One of the reasons why the Empire attacked Kamas was because they were one of the independent worlds. They were not really agreeing with us. What was it specific? What did it specifically say? Here we go. Um, Only a ruler as paranoid as and as ruthless as Palpatine would be threatened by a planet of pacifists. His people have done nothing wrong. They have merely exercised their right under the Galactic Constitution to protest the extreme restrictions and tax hikes the Empire was levying on arts, science, philosophy, and other modes of consonance. That's what it was. And another thing, I have had a few comments about this. I am aware that on these reviews, the audio quality the audio volume is very low. This is mainly just because I'm recording this with my microphone at the max amount it will pick up. And I do not have a headset. But I do have a headset, but I don't use it. It's never been set up, and honestly, again, I do not bring this up a lot on this channel, but I have OCD, and I have nowhere to put it without getting without my OCD setting off with either my head or the thing the headphones would be touching. So generally, it just wouldn't really work for me. And so um, you have just got to put up with the low audio quality. But there is a very easy because basically um when I have to export the video, I have to export videos usually a few times to get the audio quality into what it is in other videos, you know, like the basis videos or my magazine adaptations. But that can also distort the audio, and so I have to re-record the undistorted audio. I have to record over and play that audio again because usually I've got all the audio edited, so I have to record the edited audio, and that means that sometimes the audio doesn't sound quite right, i.e. my inner model adaptation or my shrinking adaptation or my tiny engine adaptation. All those have audio that has been recorded over already edited audio, which is why they sometimes have a little bit of a metallic kind of sound to them in certain areas. I can't really do anything about that without having to re-record the audio and completely re-edit the audio. Otherwise, you get very distorted audio because of the amount of times it's been exported, and ClipChamp just for some reason does that. So you kind of have to put up with that. But there's a very easy fix for and because these reviews are very low effort, you know, I just record the audio and pop it into a file and then export it because I've already got most of it edited for these reviews. All you really have to do is just turn up the volume on your device. I've done it on mobile, it sounds just turn it up, it's loud enough on mobile. I've done it on PC, it's loud enough on PC. So just turn up your volume. Just turn up your volume. That's all you have to do. It's a very easy fix. Anyway, on to the review. So we pick up with, well, we'll start off with the summary of the chapter first. So we pick up with Drax, who's fighting a training remote with a blindfold in a small courtyard. And he's able to block the first 5 bolts that hit him, but he gets hit in the right side by the 6th bolt, and he says the deactivation code for the remote, and he sits down. And I5 says remote 1, but it seems remote 1, human 0. And Jax looks at I5 and Jax says that he's still starting to think that Labyrinth is right and that the Jedi should have trained with other weapons. And I5 says, well, you blocked 5 out of 6 bolts. Only a Jedi can do that. And Jax said, well, it doesn't matter if it's the 6th or the first one, Jade is dead. And I5 says, well, what he does know is that he knows that Jax is a lot better with the what was it, the Velmorian energy sword, than he thinks he is. And I5 then quickly opens fire on Jax with a single beam, and Jax quickly lifts the energy sword and powers it up and deflects the bolt. And I5 goes, well, it seems your anticipatory, I can't say it, reflexes seem to be working fine, and he explains how fast the light moves, which we know we just know from all the shows and the movies that blaster bolts do not move at the speed of light in Star Wars. We just know that, you know, they do not move at the speed of light, but for the purposes of this book, they do move at the speed of light. Pretty much the purposes of the entire expanded universe, but I5 explains that, you know, it moves at the speed of light, and Jax was able to not only anticipate but block the bolts, so he seems, so, you know, he's still good enough with that sword. And Jax warns that Pluckett seeing his distorted reflection in the sword. I can't remember when it is. I know it's early on in the chapter. And he starts And Jax says to I-5 that, are you sure you're not carrying a Jedi Master template in there? And I-5 says, oh, Maker forbid, he doesn't want to be as... He hopes that there's no pre-programming that exists that makes him as rigid as Jedi, and Jax just frowns, and he says, oh, sorry, sometimes protocol droids can forget manners. And Jax says that no, because he knows he's right. I'm just going to read it out. I'm not upset at your opinion. What gets to me is you're right. Every living species in the galaxy knows that one either adapts or dies. It's not a difficult concept. Why didn't the Council understand it? Why couldn't they recognise the danger until it was too late? Um, and my five says that assuming the question isn't assuming for a moment the question isn't rhetorical, and he starts going on an explanation about Jax's father, Lord Pavan, and we learn that I don't know if this was also in Shadowhunter or not, but we learn that he had been a temple employee, and he had I'm just going to read it. This little bit out. He was a temple employee, as you know, and had an opportunity to observe his employers closely. Even before he became so biased against them for what he felt was your kidnapping, Lorne was under no illusions about Jedi stagnation and complacency. And I-5 recalls that he had told him about something in the Jedi files and archive, in the Jedi files, about a chosen one, and he suggests that maybe the Jedi and he says that Lorne Pavum's under suspicion, and I-5 agrees with this, that the Jedi might have been waiting for the Chosen One to come and bring balance to the Force. So, he would make the change and for them, basically. Um, and I-5 brings up the information that stop when people stop trying to change and adapt and start going in and start having more fanciful, you know, beliefs, they're usually worse off. And Jack starts wonders if he and Jax just simply nods thoughtfully. We're told that he'd heard rumours that Anakin had been the chosen one, but he had never been privy to actually knowing. And again, we're reminded that he had only been a Jedi Knight for a short period before the rise of the Empire. And we're told that he had been one of the few that had known Anakin to be who had been able to call Anakin a friend. And at this point in the chapter, I was starting to think Jax is probably at one point in these books going to find out that Vader is Anakin. You know, you can't not have a Jedi story that involves Vader and the character being somewhat closely tied to Vader in a way, and then not find out Anakin is Vader. You know, like Last of the Jedi did it. Varys found out Vader was Anakin, and I believe. Yeah, it was book 9 he found out. I was going to say book 6, but no, that was when they set it up. That's when they set it up. That's when they set that up. But it was book 9 when Ferris finally found out. So I was on, this is the point of the book where I was starting to wonder, I was just sort of having those thoughts of, Jax is probably going to find out at some point. Little did I know how soon that would be. Um, and we're reminded of something from book 1, from the first book of Coruscant Nights that I completely forgot. And we're told that despite Jax being Anakin's friend, he was under no illusions about his mood swings. And we're reminded about how at one point Jax had perceived him with very black threads, very dark threads that were multi-dimensional. And also earlier in the book, it's also described about it's also brought up that how Jax perceives the Force as threads, and how Evan Peel perceived it more as water, and how Jedi perceive it in different ways. I completely forgot about that bit. But it's not really important. Um, and Jax wonders why hadn't the Jedi sensed the darkness in Anakin, or Did they sense it and ignore it? And then Jax says, "You may be right," he finally told I-5, or at least partly right, as that we'll ever know for sure. And then that's when Jax is hit with a sudden onslaught by the Force. And it's, of course, the destruction of Kamas, the hollow course of Kamas, and that's what it says in the book. Um, and it causes Jax to collapse to his knees, and I-5 asks if he's alright, and Jax is barely able to muster up any words. And um, I've and Jax winds up getting to his feet and going into the front room, and despite I-5 trying to keep him on the ground, and when Jax finds the Labyrinth, he even her face is struck with haunt, and she just mildly and she just quietly says Kamas, and Jax is left with confusion at that moment because Kamas and its people are of course very peaceful. That was established last chapter, and how they were respected, and we told about how they had influenced so many, and how they had only had and now they had a militia rather than a regular professional army. They only had a planetary militia. Jax thinks that only someone as paranoid as Palpatine would actually attack them, and then he realises what it was all about. It was all about making a statement that Palpatine's too powerful to be overthrown. He's too comfortable in his position to be. He's too firmly comfortable in his position to be overthrown, and that it was to show that will be willing to devastate any world to protect his rule, and you know etc. And then Jax is struck with frustration at the Jedi, and he wonders how, and he starts thinking if they had just changed, they probably might have been able to see the Order 66 coming, and they might have stopped the right. And of course, it's not explicitly said in the book, but of course we know that this is probably leading Jack to think that then they could have stopped the rise of the Empire, stopped all these awful, stop everything with the Empire from happening. I'll just read this out, and this is just pretty much the ending of the book here. Not the book, the chapter. He felt, to his surprise, a sudden surge of anger against the Jedi, against his own people. Why they closed themselves off, shirked the duties and responsibilities that had been theirs for thousands of generations. If they hadn't, perhaps none of this would have happened. If they had been more receptive, they might have sensed the threat in their midst before it struck. A burst of awareness that manifests itself through the Force with absolute surety. Suddenly, Jax knew. And we're told what he knows, and we're told that he doesn't know where it's come from, what's caused it. He doesn't know if it's he doesn't know if it's the devastation of Kamas, or if it's something the Force is just telling him now. But he has no doubt that this is true. And it's that Anakin is alive. Um, it doesn't really say anything about it being Vader. We're not told whether he thinks it's Vader or not, whether he thinks Anakin is Vader, but but he knows Anakin is alive, and that's where we end the chapter. This chapter went from interesting to all of a sudden, oh, I think there is no doubt that the Jedi had lost their way by the time of the prequels, and I like that this chapter kind of delved into that. Has been a bit of a topic since the last book, and so I like that we've gone a little bit more into that. And especially since reading Darth Plagueis, I think particularly chapter 17 on that book, and I'm not going to forget. I don't think I'll ever forget chapter 17 just because of how much I was struggling to figure out what that chapter was going on about, but once I figured it out, I realised the genius of that chapter. And it was how Plagueis had basically manipulated the Jedi into admitting that they do what they think is right, not what is actually right. Um, it it's said in a it's said in a very different. They don't explicitly say that, but that's basically what they say in that. That's basically what Plagueis gets them to say in that chapter. Um, and I think that's another way that you can't see the Jedi's corruption. In that chapter, and of course they. It could be said that they did change, but for the worse. Um, and again, and I think this chapter, so it just shows that the Jedi kind of went against nature itself, and you can't argue with nature. Nature's nature. You can't really argue with it. Um, you can disagree with it, but you can't necessarily argue with it. And the Jedi basically went against nature. They didn't adapt. They didn't adapt to times changing. They didn't adapt to you know what the galaxy actually needed. That and of course that's what pretty much led to their fall. They were dismissive of the actual problems and sort of the problems that they thought were actual problems. And again, it's again kind of gone through this chapter a bit. Um, Now, I was completely expecting this chapter to start with Jax being hit with the disturbance in the Force by the destruction of Kamas. I was completely expecting that to be what caused it, to be what would be the start of the chapter, but it was involved in the chapter just a little bit later on. Um, and so it was a very interesting. I think it had a very interesting reaction. And I'm curious as to how, he knew it's Darth Vader. I mean, how it knew that Anakin's alive. What gave him that surety? Because even Jax doesn't quite know. He doesn't know whether it was sprung by the Force itself, just at this moment, or whether it was sprung by the devastation of Kamas. Um, but he's sure that Anakin is alive. Which again that's a very interesting thing. That's just you just it's just hit him. You know, I don't think we'll ever get an explanation as to why. And just watch like two chapters, like a couple chapters from now, we're gonna get the explanation. But it's definitely interesting. Definitely interesting. Um, Again, I think the talk of the Jedi in this chapter was it was a good topic. I think you understand Jax's frustrations because the problems were so obvious and the Jedi just didn't really do anything to solve them. So yeah, um, it's another thing is it's great to kind of see I5 and Jax getting along now, and I5 again can't be has kind of been the closest thing to a mentor Jax has had in the books so far. Narath has somewhat been a mentor, but more so in she's the voice of reason for Jax. And there's only really been a couple instances where she's not following someone else's opinion when she winds up being the voice of reason. She usually agrees with other people's reasons, that although we do know that she can have an independent voice of reason that she brings up first, because that's one of the first things that we see with her when she's first introduced in the previous book. So I think she has that same opinion before the characters speak it, but she just doesn't get a chance to say it first. Um, but it's interesting that now I5 is in a little bit more of a mentorish position. Um, so yeah. Um, and I think it mainly just is because he's kind of the closest thing Jax has to a father, because I5 of course knew Jax's father, but and he spent some time with Jax. He spent quite a lot of time with Jax's father, of course. So he's kind of the closest thing Jax has to not only a father but a mentor. Especially now. Now this is completely off topic. Um, but I just want to bring up well, two things up actually. First off, why does Jax need so many weapons? In the first book alone, he has a lightsaber, a holdout blaster, a vibro knife, a Jericho's poniard, and a light whip. In this book, adding to his arsenal so far is a Steel Vibro sword that's been woven with cortosis, and now the Velmorian energy sword. I'm fairly sure that and I know later on he gets the red lightsaber, and I'm fairly sure it's in this book. How many weapons does Jax need? And he's only used he only used three of the weapons I listed for in the first book, which was the lightsaber, light whip, and vibro knife. The holdout blaster he pulls out when he first met Larenth in that book. The Juraquist poniard's never been used so far. And all the weapons that have been introduced in this book we have seen gotten used now. But it definitely just is a... He doesn't... How many weapons does he need? Um, so, yeah. But still, it's... and then there's another bit, which is... Why on the backs of these books does it say Jax is a private investigator? Because at no point in these books, at least so far, has Jax ever been a private investigator. He's a bounty hunter in the first book. It's very explicitly said he was a bounty hunter. He became a bounty hunter. Nowhere in these books so far as it says he's a private investigator, except for the publisher's summary on the back. Where is private investigator coming from? Bounty hunter's somewhat similar to a private investigator, but still not massively similar. They're distinct enough to be two separate things. So where is private investigator coming from? Because they're definitely not. He's definitely not a private investigator. So I don't know where that has come from. I don't know where the publisher's summary got that from, but for some reason it says he's a private investigator, even though he most definitely is not. So I don't know where that came from. And actually set an expectation with these books, because I'll be honest, going into these books, I was expecting Jax and I5 to come, because they were on the cover of the first book, to already be together, and they were going to be handed an assignment they were going to be handed something to investigate by someone, and that would be like the through line for books 1, 2, and 3. Of Coruscant Nights. I thought that was what Coruscant Nights was going to be like. But no, it's completely different. I think it's an interesting storyline, but but saying he's a private investigator completely butched my expectations of these books. So yeah. So I have completely no idea what was coming in the first book, or in this book. I only knew what was happening in the first book because I read the publisher's summary on it, and I don't know what's coming in this book because I haven't read the publisher's summary, and it hasn't really gotten to the point yet. So I think, speaking of getting to the point, in the first book I made quite a complaint of the book just taking a quarter of the book to actually get to the point. Well, almost a quarter, around about a quarter. To actually get us set on the mission to find Bug Eyes. This book, I think it is still taking its time, Next chapter is going to be chapter 5, and there's only about 30 chapters in this book, so, it's still taking a while to get to the point. But I think with Typho, you know, we were told in the prologue exactly what his storyline is going to be about. Jax Jax's storyline, you know, our main storyline. I think at the moment we're just kind of playing it a bit slow with them, and I think that's the right way to go. Just let us spend a little bit of time with these characters, especially coming off the back of the last book. I think as good as that book was towards the end, and it was all right to begin with, then and it just slowly got better as it went on. It definitely, I think one of the weakest parts, I think one of the most varied parts, that's the word, of that book was just the character work. Some characters were written really well, and then there was some characters that weren't written very well, or at least weren't written well to begin with. And Jax being the one that wasn't written well to begin with, Lauren being the one that she has some interesting qualities, but she needs a bit more meat on the bone. And she just hasn't quite gotten there yet. And I like that we're spending a bit more time with the characters. Again, I would like a little bit more with Larenth. You know, she's been the least developed character. And and I brought up in my Jedi Twilight reviews that my big concern with introducing all these new characters is that we're not going to have enough time for Larenth. Because again, there's not really been a lot she kind of just is there to, you know, take Jax's place when Jax can't fill in that place, you know, because she's a Jedi. Um, so I think that maybe sometimes the book feels like she's just there to be there. Um, so I do hope she becomes a little bit into more of a full, well-rounded character. Just like, definitely an interest. She definitely has some interesting things to her character, like being a Grey Paladin, and she definitely has some interesting things that we all already know about her character. Oh my goodness, this review's almost 30 minutes. But yeah, she has some very interesting qualities about her character. Again, like you can watch that chapter 13 review. You know, I brought up about how she has a very interesting feel to her. And we just haven't really explored much of her character, really. So I do kind of hope that we do learn a bit more about her character. Um, so yeah. I don't know, now I don't know what I was talking about, to begin with. Uh, but yeah, I'm gonna end the review here because we're almost at 30 minutes. Let's get it going on until we reach 30 minutes. You know, I'll end it at exactly 30 minutes. 10 seconds. So, thank you all for watching. Thank you for watching the review. Tell me what you thought below, and goodbye. 3, 2, 1, bye.